today, this presentation will be more about introduction, and then I also want to cover two recent experiences that I've had. One is when I was in the Gambia, another one in Indonesia, where I was focused specifically on different components that you will be able to use when you're doing black tiger shrimp aquaculture. So that's the goal of discussing the later experiences, is what did I do in the past that you guys can learn from and use those same exact experiences for your own practices. Okay. So the three stages I will talk about will be general hatchery management, broodstock management, and larval rearing. So I have that document with me, a soft copy, and I can give that to you, and so that we can get it for tomorrow on that. And it's all like 3 steps, it's fairly simple, but just a lot of information. So preparation, infrastructure development, that really is just about keeping your facilities clean to prevent diseases and future problems. I mean, if you think about it simply, it's not that complicated, but the problem is it's a lot of steps involved to make sure that you don't cause any future problems. Broodstock management, yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's another issue. Listening to the prior presentation, it's more about where do we get that here. So that's kind of, I mean, that would be great for your input on this one, because I guess I don't have any experience in Nigeria before coming here. So it would be good if we go interaction, because I have more of my personal experience in a lot of past assessments, but let's see how we can apply that here in Nigeria. And that would be the same for better management practices for larval rearing management. And these all primarily, the main issues would be water quality, disease, and making sure that you're prepared for this. I mean, my general concept of this is it's primarily human management than anything else. If you know what to expect and you have ahead of time the relevant preparation, you'll be ready for the next step. So I guess that's the best way to look at it. Next one. So yeah, this will be the general hatchery management overview. As I said, infrastructure, facility maintenance, water quality, wastewater, biosecurity, developing an SOP. I think this one, my opinion, this one is probably the most important, because if you have specific procedures set in place that everybody needs to follow, and so it's basically you already have a plan. And when you have a plan, it's easier to know. I mean, it's not easier to know, but it's easier to follow specific guidelines to make sure that you finish with a high quality product. That makes sense if it does. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Hazard analysis, critical control point approach, chemical use during hatchery production process, and health assessment. So this is pretty much just preparing everything. I mean, this is just maintaining your infrastructure and facility to ensure that anything that happens, you're just ready, you know what to do. Broodstock management, so this is, I mean, we'll get into this, I think we'll get into more of the specifics behind this tomorrow. I mean, basically, you're involved in every step in the process to get to here. And this is how do you say it? This is the part that makes all the money. And so this is definitely the most important in my mind. I mean, just to kind of think about it purely profit and revenue. I mean, if you come up with a high quality product here, then everything else is worth it. And the concern is that maybe at any step in the process you have a specific difficulty where maybe I don't know, there's a specific disease or your facility isn't as clean as it could be, or there's biosecurity issues. But I guess as for the separate, fairly a lot of words in the slide, but the separate ongoing culture practices, I did want to go into a little in depth about the extensive, semi-intensive, and intensive. And I guess which ones were you primarily interested in?
Intensive is expensive.
No, let's.
Please, all.
Depends on the person.
All of them. Okay, okay,
Okay,
okay.
take us in all of them.
Yes.
Okay, because these three, they have different, well, obviously completely different growing techniques and different interests in mind. I mean, my recommendation, if this is still early in the black tiger shrimp practices in Nigeria, I think semi-intensive would be the best approach to start with. Only because, I should have put the slide up, I have the numbers, but it's cheaper to do semi-intensive than intensive. And extensive just takes too much time. It takes significantly longer than the others. This one is certainly the least amount of effort, but it also creates the most amount of problems because you're not putting as much into the artificial feed or the seeds. Okay, yeah, larger size shrimp are commonly harvested within 6 months or more. So 6 months does seem to be a bit too long. At least, I don't know what your standards are going to be in this case. I'm sorry? I mean, 6 months just seems a bit too long. So we'll go into the next one, semi-intensive. Commonly stocked with hatchery-produced seeds at the rate of 5 to 20 post-larva per square meter. So go back to the picture. So I mean, you can kind of see the difference between the two. Obviously, you know, semi-intensive has more of the. I mean, this would be for the post-larva, and then this would be more of a larval rear tank in the meantime. So it's, I mean, it's just different approach. It's, I would say it's certainly less. This one is less expensive than this one, and then this one is just, yeah, the least. Okay. Go to intensive. Okay, and this would be for intensive. This one is, this one's best if you have your own facility and you want to go. I would recommend this one if you want to go completely independently. It's just a bit smaller, 0.1 to 1 hectare, generally speaking. So this might be a useful technique if you were able to, if you wanted to start small scale and did not need to go too large immediately. I mean, but it certainly requires a lot more effort, So I guess this is good, just something to consider, something to think about is, you know, which of these three techniques may be best for your specific situation. But my recommendation would be semi-intensive would be probably the best approach.
Let's go back to 16.
Okay, go back. From top to bottom, it's a step-by-step process. Okay, I mean, so just think about it like this. This is, you have the, well, they're going to reproduce their offspring, and this is the farmer. Okay, this is the entire step-by-step process. So you put the broodstock maturation tank or wild spawner, and then they spawn. But this is, I guess I'm trying to make it sound easy, but in between each step it gets complicated because there's quite a few variables you really need to consider, and so that's what we'll get into that tomorrow. But I'm just generalizing for now. Okay.
Okay.
Just generalizing
Okay.
for now. Okay. So then from here, spawning tank where they hatch. And then, Napoli, I think that's how you pronounce it. It goes into the larval rearing tank. And in this case, in the semi-intensive pond, larval rearing tank can also be shared with the actual post-larval development pond. However, in this one, well, okay, and then, but in intensive pond, they're separate mechanisms. And the role of that, I mean, generally speaking, you want each of these to be separate. If you put all of this into one pond, it could be a potential for disaster, just because share diseases in water quality. I mean, it's always good to have separate facilities so you know what you're encountering at each step. Okay. When I was in Indonesia, they were using intensive. And that was only practical in their case because they just had the facilities and they had already been practicing this for quite a while, for several years. And so they had the manpower, they had the resources and the facilities to conduct it. But I think this one would be good.
Sorry, excuse me.
This brings us to aquaculture certification. This is the primary component of, the reason why we're doing everything else. You want to follow a healthy step-by-step process to ensure that your shrimp is safe to eat, but also you can, hopefully, with the right connections, you can export it for sale. So everything we discussed earlier, and everything that we will discuss, does involve animal health and welfare, food safety and quality, environmental integrity, and social responsibility. So as I just said, following aquaculture certification guidelines will enable you to export shrimp and provide marine resource economic incentives. 3 major concepts just take away from this. Black Tiger shrimp aquaculture management requires a well-developed management plan. So, something to think about. And as I mentioned, we will discuss and get into more detail of general hatchery management, broodstock management, and larval rearing management. And if you follow all of these requirements, you will certainly be able to maintain aquaculture certification guidelines. So it's an all-encompassing process. Follow this and you can have get everything that you aim to achieve. So that was just pretty much an overview. Now I want to go into 2 examples of what I encountered in the Gambia and Indonesia. So let's go to Indonesia first. Shrimp aquaculture practices in Southeast Asia. This one was specific to white shrimp aquaculture. White shrimp. But these practices that we developed were exactly what we should look into here. So again, it was just on the south coast of Java. It was actually very similar to here. It was a mangrove ecosystem. So that was one of the primary objectives of this plan, was to balance the mangrove ecosystem with white shrimp aquaculture management. Okay. So in this case, I developed a business proposal plan to get some funding. Unfortunately, we didn't get the funding, but we still were able to get everything planned and developed, and I will distribute this business proposal to you so you can have a good idea of what I actually did on the ground, and then you can just take pieces of that you want to utilize in your own activities. So, like I said, I teamed up with the local district government and a local aquaculture business. Think about it simply, it's not that. And we developed a business plan for white shrimp aquaculture public-private partnership. And then the district government was to establish a regulatory environment and encourage local residents to take part in the farming practices. The role of the business was to manage, farm, and sell the white shrimp. So the business was pretty much in charge of a lot of the activities on the ground, and the district government was also very important to create an enabling environment for us. And then obviously the local farmers, they were the ones, they were farming the shrimp. Okay. And so, as I mentioned, this was intensive white shrimp aquaculture ponds. And so there were so this was the local business that I teamed up with. They had already established their own intensive white shrimp aquaculture ponds at a separate location. And so these pictures were taken from that separate location that we were planning to duplicate in this other district. And so for each of these, they had separate ponds for everything we discussed earlier. So maturation, spawning, post-larval rearing, and yeah, I guess I wish I had the numbers for the hectares so we can get into that. But I remember it was fairly extensive,
Each pond is about how many hectares?
Sorry?
Each of the pond is how many hectares?
I wish I knew. I guess if I knew ahead of time, I would have taken the measurements, but I didn't get that. So, but I will. Let's see some of the numbers. Okay, so as for this was in the proposal that we had put together. So the objectives were to establish shrimp aquaculture cultivation, a local aquaculture value chain, create an aquaculture cultivation team. Those are the ones who pretty much were the local farmers who were in charge of managing other farmers. It's always useful. You trust others that are like you. And institutional capacity building to support mangrove ecosystem management. So as for some of the hectare numbers, in our proposal we had a 1.15 hectares, but not one pond. These were separate entities in one single area. So they were just right next to each other. And then this was just some of the numbers, 10 million rupiah, that's about $1,000 US that we were going to pay the district government for the rights, so we can have user rights over this area. Aquaculture plots collectively rented for a percentage of the monthly aquaculture profit. And shrimp production cycle, 1 to 2 week pond preparation period, a 3-month production period, and 9 shrimp production cycles through pond crop rotation for a projected output of 23.6 total tons. So, like I said, you take the 1.15 hectares, split them up into separate ponds, and then among this we have, the goal was 9 shrimp production cycles over a period of 1 year. I mean, that's a goal. And then looking at our selling price, that's how much we were selling, and then we were projecting a good revenue on this, and ideally create longer term white shrimp aquaculture farming practices to continue far beyond this single year. So as for some of the logistics, we chose a specific location that was close to the community, but distance from industrial and port activities, that was important. And it's an area that is environmentally uncontaminated and near to the sea, so we can utilize seawater resources. So this was marine resources for a separate intensive aquaculture pond. So, as she mentioned earlier that we did not, that while here today we're not going to be talking about freshwater, but in this case we would have essentially imported seawater. Excuse me. Okay, this was an interesting one. During cultivation, we plant strict biosecurity. Again, biosecurity, it's always important. To exclude introduction and propagation of unwanted organisms through a bottom of organic sediment, isolated to eliminate acid layer, acronym BioSeal, construction system within each pond. I mean, this was, honestly, at the time I'd never heard of this. And so I knew that this was a fairly new fairly new initiative, and so it was good to know this. I have more information on this, but this is just a quick bullet. The bioseal system separates water bodies from organic sediments that may cause acid layers. I found this to be very resourceful, just taking our what we had available, and we were able to construct. We had the potential to construct a pretty good and valuable aquaculture cultivation establishment. So application for here, I think work closely with everybody around you in this one. It's always going to be valuable. And establish roles and responsibilities for everyone involved. So if you So then the next one I want to go into my recent experience in the Gambia. That one was very different than Indonesia, but it was also a very valuable tool for many experiences that we can learn for application here in Nigeria. Okay, I was in the Gambia from November until mid-December. This was 2 months ago. I was there for 6 weeks, and I was part of an evaluation team for a USAID project. And this was their goal, and it's pretty diverse, but all of these things you could really apply here. It's pretty useful. And primarily to accomplish this goal, Manafa implements the 2 co-management plans. And I don't know, are you familiar with co-management? Co-management is basically when you have, in fisheries co-management, you have the government and you have other stakeholders managing together. So it's not just government and it's not just communities. It involves all fisheries stakeholders. And so what they did was that for these 2, they drafted what's called the national level. The Department of Fisheries drafted plans that legally regulated the involvement of all fisheries management stakeholders to legally work together with the government. Went up and down the coast to observe and meet with stakeholders to find out what they were actually doing to implement this project. And it was very interesting. So one project component was the Tri-Oyster Women's Association. They organized and established local oyster and cockle harvesting. While this is not black tiger shrimp, their management practices are something that we can really think about here. Harvesting occurs 4 months per year, whereas before it was all the time. It was all the time. And this makes a difference because they now can get more money for the bigger oyster and cockle. So it's better for them. It's better when you can get more money. That's always a good thing, right? So in this case, they can harvest in the mangrove, maintain a healthier mangrove ecosystem, and gain economic incentives. So it's a good combination for the ecosystem and the local farmers. So again, like I said, standard operating procedure, always a good thing, because when you have specific rules that you need to follow, people will follow them. At least you hope so. So, and they also did other things, microfinance, provided shellfish handling and hygiene training. And yeah, so the handling and the hygiene training, again, useful tools to follow, like I said, the aquaculture certification guidelines. Another activity that took place, they did a hotel market survey, and because they were trying to conducted educational exchanges with Senegal. And the purpose of this was for the survey was just to expand into the private sector. And as for the educational exchange with Senegal, they just were able to do technology transfer and learn from concepts that they were implementing across the border. And currently they're in the process of aquaculture certification. So, like I said, aquaculture certification is such a long process that you can't immediately get it like that, but they are working toward it. So as for, now the other component is the sole fisheries. So like I said, there's two co-management plans. One was for oyster and cockle, the other one was for sole. Now this is referring specifically to the sole. I know that, like I just said, there's quite a few different members of the fisheries management from Nigeria here. So they also did similar concepts where they teamed up, where they had the Gambita and NAFO with Department of Fisheries on the national level to meet the sustainability criteria required to be eligible for MSC certification. So again, Marine Stewardship Council to be labeled essentially as called eco-label, and so it can be sold to outside countries and become an exportable commodity. And oops, go back. And back in 2010, the sole fishery had a pre-audit conducted based on MSC criteria for a clear roadmap of sustainability issues. And the audit from MSC identified 7 specific areas for improvement to meet sustainability criteria. So again, to get the sustainability, to get the certification, they had this outside organization come in, audit, assess the practices, and find out where they needed improvements. So that would be something, I don't know if you guys think about just to see where you want to go for sustainability. But these are useful because a lot of these things, each one of these is something that you should consider yourself. For the project, they entered into an MOU with MSC to assist the fishermen, processors, and Department of Fisheries address the deficiencies that I just listed. And at present, they have an agreement with MSC to move forward for international certification of the sustainable Gambian sole fisheries product. So like I said, although this is sole, and we're talking about black tiger shrimp, it's going to be a very similar process in order to get what we want to achieve here. Again, for what we can learn from this is mangrove ecosystem management and healthy ecosystem management is important for long-term health of shrimp. That was the primary purpose they did that for oyster and cockle. So it's going to be a similar concept here. To export, you need to follow international certification requirements, and the process involves collaboration with all stakeholders, like I said in the last one. All right, that's it for these initial presentations.